Hey guys, Andrew at Prime Medical Training. Today we're going to take a look at some common mistakes that people make when performing CPR. Before we jump into that, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like this video. We would appreciate your support, and you're able to stay engaged with us as we put out more helpful and useful content to keep you more informed and make you more response ready. So, what are the mistakes that people make? Well, let's talk about compressions first. One of the problems that people do is they are compressing in the incorrect position. So, the American Heart Association says that you need to compress and place your hands at the bottom half of the sternum. A lot of people talk about putting your hands at the nipple line, but that's not a realistic landmark, because the nipple line can be in different places for different people, especially as you get older and your breasts begin to sag more. Your nipple line could be literally down here in your abdomen. So that's not a great landmark. The better landmark that doesn't change is going to be the middle half of the breastbone or the lower half of the breastbone. And so you're going to take the heel of your hand, set it there. Going up too high, you're just not going to be able to get much of a compression. You won't get much movement up here. And then if you go too low, you run the risk of putting pressure on the xiphoid process, which is this tiny little bone at the end of your sternum, and it's easy to break that off. So that's one issue that we see. Mainly with lay providers, not so much medical people, is wrong hand placement. Another thing that we see people doing incorrectly is the compression rate. And this applies to everybody, lay people and medical providers. So oftentimes people are going way too fast. And if you're going too fast doing compressions, you're pumping the heart like this, and you never give the heart enough time to refill with blood before pumping it back out. And so all you're doing is basically just pumping an empty chamber, and that's not helping your victim. On the other side of that, you can have somebody who's going too slow. And this happens especially the more that a person does CPR, they get fatigued and they start slowing down. And when you start slowing down, you no longer have, you're not building up blood pressure. And so if you go too slow, the blood pressure in the body is going to drop. And when the blood pressure drops, you're not able to then push oxygen into the cells and organs. So you need the pressure to be able to oxygenate the tissues and organs and cells in your body. So compression rate is a big one. And on the topic of compressions, we also see people who are getting lazy. This also comes with fatigue, or people that are really large. So when you're doing a compression here, you go down and you never come all the way back up before going down again, and that's just lazy CPR. And like I said, as you get tired, having to bring your body fully back up to a neutral position with the chest, that takes more effort, and so people start slacking off in that area. Or if you're a really large person and you've got a lot of weight, having to pick up all that weight also can wear you down, and so then you start getting sloppy. And again, when you do that and you compress the heart down, but you don't allow the heart to fully reopen, you're not allowing it to fully refill with blood. So that's why we focus on making sure that you have full chest recoil. So that's the issues related to compressions. Some other issues that we find is with airway. Now this is not as much of a problem anymore, but the American Heart Association changed over 10 years ago the requirement from going from ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation, and they're not prioritizing circulation, CAB. So we focus on compressions first and then airway. And most people, I think, at this point got that, and you don't see people starting with airway first unless they haven't taken CPR in a long time and they're just recollecting what they learned in high school back in the day. But along the lines of airway issues, though, we do see people that are very focused, especially in the medical field. Like, they're very focused on wanting to get that airway, make sure they're ventilating, and sometimes to the detriment of compressions. And they're not doing high-quality compressions because they're focused on trying to make sure that they have advanced airways and things of that nature. So, the American Heart Association has said that a person, an adult specifically, they can go 8 minutes after they've gone into cardiac arrest without any ventilation. There's enough oxygen already in your bloodstream that if you can just do high quality compressions and circulate that around, you're going to be able to perfuse and give your body the oxygen it needs for 8 minutes. And there's no difference in survival rates from people who get CPR with breaths versus people who don't get CPR or who don't get breaths during CPR. No difference in survival rates during those first 8 minutes. So it's really important that you prioritize compressions. That's something that a lot of people in the medical field especially don't do, and they get hung up on trying to get that airway. And then the last thing I'll say about airway is two things. One, people who overventilate, and so they're either breathing in with their mouth and they just blow too much. And when you see chest rise, that's when you should stop. But some people, they keep blowing, they get these long, big breaths, and so that causes complications because your lungs fill up with air. And once your lungs are full, if you keep blowing, the air has to go somewhere, so it starts overflowing into your stomach. And if you blow your stomach up enough with air, it's going to cause the victim to start vomiting. And if you're laying on your back and vomiting, then you now have a choking hazard, and it causes aspiration. That vomit gets into the lungs, and that can actually be fatal for the victim. You might be able to get their heart to start beating again, but then they're going to end up in the ICU and potentially die of an infection in their lungs and pneumonia. So that's an important thing, making sure that you're not ventilating your patient. The other thing is for people who are in the medical field that do more advanced airway techniques, when you have an advanced airway inserted into the patient, you're supposed to do non-stop ventilations, you're supposed to do non-stop compressions, and with ventilations, 1 breath every 6 seconds. But the problem is that they're doing compressions, and then you have this person here who's just bagging away, and they're just blowing a ton of air in. And what's funny to me is that the majority of people that I see doing this are the respiratory therapists, and that's like their main job, and they should know what they're doing, and they're not. And they're just going away, not even paying attention to what they're doing, and blowing a ton of air in. And it's the same problem we can run into is potential overinflation of the lungs, air going into the stomach then. And then there's some other issues too related to like free radicals. You have barotension in the lungs, and that increased pressure of the lungs because they're remaining full and they're not decreasing, that those lungs then are pushing up against your inferior vena cava, and then because you're putting pressure on that inferior vena cava, blood is not being able to return to the heart as readily, and so you're reducing circulation. So a lot of things that people don't realize and think about, they just see it for what it is. They're like, oh, I'm just blowing a little faster than I should. But there are actual implications to doing that kind of stuff. So that was a deep dive into the common mistakes that we see for CPR. I hope that was informative for you, and I hope that also changes the way that you approach and perform CPR on your victims if you ever had to. If you have any questions or comments or thought of things that I didn't mention, leave them in the comments below. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to engage with you. Again, this is Andrew with Prime Medical Training. Thanks for watching.